My name's Denison Bertram. I'm with DappHero. We are a project, an application that is, we consider ourselves the easiest way to connect your website to the blockchain. What I mean by that is smart contract development. You can build things on Ethereum, but there's kind of like this idea of the last mile, right? Like the decentralized future is this like thing in the distance, like across the Great Canyon, right? It's like this perfect future out there. And we have a lot of great development tools already in the ecosystem. But when you're building and you're building your smart contracts and you're building your like decentralized this or decentralized that, it's kind of like a bridge that isn't finished, right? So you get on this bridge and you're crossing it and you're going towards like this decentralized future. And right before you get there, you realize that the bridge isn't finished, you know, and the distance between you and the future is just a little bit too far. And for us, that is connecting your actual website to blockchain, right? Like understanding how to program smart contracts is an entire, you know, discipline in and of itself. Understanding blockchain is an entire discipline in itself. These things are all things that you can be experts in. And not everyone can also be an expert in front-end development, right? So today, generally, if you were to connect, to build a front end for your blockchain application, you would probably use a JavaScript framework like React or Vue. And these are very powerful, and I'm a big fan of them. I'm originally a front-end developer for React. But to get started with blockchain, to just connect Ethereum to your website, generally it takes around 200 lines of code in a React application, and that's a lot to get started. And that's a lot of boilerplate to get started. What it also means is that if you are going to add blockchain to an existing website, sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it's really just impossible, right? If you were going to add Ethereum smart contracts to WordPress today, that would be very, very difficult. If you were going to add it to something like a Squarespace or a Wix, that would be very, very difficult. If you were going to build with a static site generator, right? So you were going to use maybe like an HTML templating engine, that would be very, very difficult. So what DappHero does is DappHero actually allows you to connect smart contracts and other Ethereum-based features to your website using only HTML tags, right? And the idea behind this is development is a lot faster. It's a lot easier. Everything's happening client-side in the browser. And now it means that rather than starting with, 200 lines of code or a Create React app or a Vue app or a Svelte or something like that, you can actually just start building your front-end app using Notepad, using a text editor, right? Anywhere that you generate and display HTML, you can now have blockchain built in. You can now have Ethereum built in. And that really opens up the application base of where you can start building front ends for dApps. Right? That means that you can be pulling information from the Ethereum blockchain on smart TVs. You can be using it inside of websites that are hosted on IPFS. You can be using it inside of Squarespace. Right? It really makes the places that you can use it much broader, but it also allows you to develop faster, right? So that's what DappHero is about. It's this idea of we are making connecting websites to the blockchain a lot faster. So what this workshop is going to be about today is I'm going to go through connecting to a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain. We're going to use wrapped ETH, which is a very popular DeFi contract. Actually, it is in my opinion, well, more than my opinion, it's the most successful DeFi contract ever because there's actually over $500 million locked up inside of it. And for most DeFi applications, you wrap your Ether into the wrapped ETH contract first because that turns your ETH into an ERC20 compatible contract, which now you can use in the rest of the DeFi ecosystem. So what we'll go through today is building a front end around that, which is actually very easy with DappHero. You can get a front end to get started with nearly instantly now. We've got a new feature that I'll be demoing today, which is we actually auto-generate websites for you based on your smart contract projects. So you have something where you can instantly have a starting point to start building. More than just HTML, we also expose on your client-side window in the DOM, on the window object, we actually expose all the underlying things that you need to access for more advanced functionality, right? So you have access to smart contract events, you have access to understanding the transaction flow, you actually get access to your contract instances as well as your Web3 provider, right? So you can go from building something really quickly and simple to really building something very powerful. And if we have time, I'll show you some of the extra features that we have. We're starting to build things around non-DeFi related things as well. But we're going to try and stay focused today on DeFi, and in this case, wrapped ETH. So I'm going to open up my little presentation to walk through that. And if at any point you guys have questions, or not you guys, but you people, trying to not be gendered, just let me know. You can pop it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and just ask the question, because sometimes when presenting, it takes up the full screen, so I don't actually see the chat questions. So if you do have a question, just yell out, because otherwise I'm probably not going to see it. So let me share my screen. I don't have permission to share my screen, actually. So let's see.
It should be sorted now.
Now I'm the host now. Whenever Zoom says you are the host now, I always want to do that thing from that movie about the Somali pirates where I'm like, look at me. I am the host now. All right? Okay, so now I'm sharing. Do that. This, make this, play that. So hopefully everyone can see this, and I'm at the start of my presentation, which is not where I want to be. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. All right, so DappHero, the workshop, connecting to DeFi smart contracts with DappHero. So these are some resources to sort of like keep track of. We have our website, a documentation site. We also have a Telegram. We have a forum, which is new, so there's not much there, but I'm going to be trying to move discussions into the forum so that questions that get answered can be used by other people to help them, so everyone gets that. We have an email, which is social@dapphero.io. I'm trying to use that more. And a Twitter. Oops, did I just? All right. All right, so next window. Right, so I already told you a little bit about what DappHero is. It makes it easy to connect to Ethereum, to the blockchain. Currently, we support only Ethereum, but we are technically blockchain agnostic. Oh, I think somebody's microphone is on and it's loud. Oh, wait, is that a question, though? No, maybe not. Okay. So, I don't. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So DappHero currently supports Ethereum. We are blockchain agnostic, but at the moment there are a lot of blockchains, and Ethereum seems to have the real momentum in terms of where development is. So currently we support only Ethereum. Someone's mic is still on and it's really loud, just so you know. So we provide a single connection to the blockchain, which means that we make it really convenient and easy for you. You can connect to features such as smart contracts, users' accounts, NFTs, using only HTML tags. And like I mentioned, you can use this anywhere that you generate HTML. So this will work great with static site generators, so you could use something like Hugo as a template engine, or Gatsby, or WordPress. You can even build now blockchain-enabled sites with things like PHP, which I don't know how many people are still using PHP, but I certainly got started in web development on PHP, so it exists out there. What's really cool about this is that it's also compatible with no-code tools such as Webflow. So you can design your site in Webflow, and because DappHero works with HTML tags, you can just add tags to your elements in Webflow, and now you have a Webflow hosted, beautifully designed, well, if you're a good designer, beautifully designed website that has blockchain built into it. So the requirements to do this is you need a DappHero account, a web page for the HTML where you can edit the HTML or add tags to HTML elements. Not all software lets you do that, so this is important. You'll need to be able to add tags, and specifically data tags. So we use the data tag format, so it starts starts with data, and then we do dash, and then we have some sort of our own HTML tag definitions. In general, if you want to connect to smart contracts, you don't need smart contracts to use DappHero. For example, NFT features are available without using a smart contract. Some other features such as getting users identity. We also support decentralized identity with 3-box, and that can be done without a smart contract. But if you're connecting to a smart contract, you will need a smart contract deployed on Ethereum. And MetaMask. Currently, we support MetaMask for user providers. We are looking into supporting additional wallets like Portis and Fortmatic. We're just trying to see what's the best solution for this. One of the things about DappHero is that because we're letting you connect to the blockchain using HTML tags, we're actually very careful to try and not disrupt the look and feel of your website, right? So we aren't making any assumptions about how your website looks. So we avoid as much as possible to avoid changing your styling, your look and feel of your website. And the MetaMask, the provider sort of question is a big question about like how you enable support for different providers, how you inform your user. So we're currently sort of working through a few different ideas on how to do that in the best way without sort of interjecting ourselves into the design of folks' websites. So the overview of steps that we'll go through is sign up at DappHero. You will need an account to get started. We will create a new project. We'll add smart contracts to our project, and then we'll tag our HTML elements. And as I mentioned, we released a new feature today. So everyone gets to sort of beta test that today. So it might break. So hopefully it doesn't. But, and that feature will actually generate the site for you. So we're trying to make the process of getting from starting to your first moment of success as fast as possible. We just want you to like instantly have something that's working and then have the full creativity and freedom to like start developing from there. Of course, I'll also give you an example of how you would start from scratch without the website creator. So we'll do both. Sign up at DappHero. Create a new project. All right, so let's go through the creating a new project. So I'm going to close. I'm going to stop sharing that, and now I'm going to open up DappHero itself, and I'm going to share a new window. Where is my window that I'm trying to share, though? Hold on, I'm looking for it. Meanwhile, do we have any questions while I'm trying to get this new window sharing working?
Hi. I just have one doubt regarding Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any possibility of tapping for Ethereum coins?
What do you mean?
So let's assume we invested 10,000 rupees. And let's assume we had got one Ethereum coin. Okay.
Ethereum coin?
I mean, one Ethereum. Yeah. Let's assume like one Ethereum is worth 10,000 rupees, Indian rupees.
Okay.
Okay. So is there any possibility, like if the market falls down, so to have the consistency of 10,000 rupees, is there any possibility for tapping for extra Ethereum coins?
Okay. Yeah. So I think in that sense, if I understand your question correctly, I think you're actually asking about stable coins. And DappHero itself doesn't take a position on the monetary value of coins. So, DappHero in and of itself doesn't allow you to like protect your investment in Ethereum, for example. But you could use other DeFi. There are a number of DeFi projects that give you protection against the volatility of the Ethereum price. So things, for example, DAI or Maker, where you buy a stable coin. And I think there's a new project called Open or OPYN, which actually allows you to buy a kind of insurance against the price of Ethereum dropping. So there are tools out there in the DeFi space. DappHero itself isn't a DeFi specific, functional specific things, but you could, for example, build an application with DappHero that allowed you to offer that service to people.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen now. So this is the DappHero website. I've already signed up, of course, so I'm just going to go to the dashboard. And what we're going to do is we have projects and contracts. If you were to create a new project, which we can do right here by clicking on new, this is the information that you get. The first thing you see is your script tag. And this script tag is actually the script tag that you need to put into your HTML in order to load the DappHero core engine inside your website, right? So normally what you would do, and you can actually click on this to go to the documentation, you would put this script tag into your HTML at the top. Let me find a good example for that. And that is what would run the DappHero engine inside of your HTML. And so just to show you really quickly, this is glitch.com. This is one of my favorite online code editors, just because it's really friendly and easy. While that's loading up, it's also maybe a little slow sometimes. But if we go back here, so that's what your script tag is. I'll show you where that goes in your HTML in a minute. This is your name of your project. We auto-generate you a name, but you should replace this. So I'm going to do ETHIndia wrapped ETH. And then I'm going to give it a description. This is the description of my wrapped ETH project. So the name of the description actually is kind of important, because when you auto-generate your website, this information will pop up in your auto-generated website. So now the most important thing here is networks and contracts. Here, the process is you first select a network, and then you select your smart contract. Now, currently, we haven't created any smart contracts yet, so we won't have any to choose from. So we're going to have to go do that. Actually, the XDAI is listed here, but we have a small bug in XDAI support. You can use it, but it's considered experimental at the moment. Users will have to have their providers on MetaMask, and sometimes there's some bugs with that. So for right now, you can choose any of these main networks. Down here, we have a status where we have enabled and unlocked. Enabled means that you can turn your project, you can pause your project, which means that in the front end, it won't run. And this is useful sometimes for integrating with some sites such as Cargo Collective, which is a sort of like a portfolio generation site, where they basically what you're doing is when you're designing, you're interacting with your page's HTML live. And if you have DappHero running at the same time, DappHero is also interacting with your HTML at the same time. So that can cause conflicts. So if you do have conflicts like that, you would want to pause the DappHero engine while you're working on it. Otherwise, you won't need that. Unlocked is just your ability to lock your project, which means you can't make any further changes. And that protects you from doing things like accidentally deleting your project. So the two new features which we're going to go through today as well is the HTML generation and the website generator. Right now, we don't have any smart contracts. So if you were to generate a website right now, you'd get an empty website because you have no smart contract. So what we need to do, now that we've saved our project, we gave it a name, we're going to go create a smart contract, right? So we go over to the contract area, and we see we have no contracts. So what we want to do now is we want to add a new smart contract. And this is where we're going to add the wrapped ETH contract. So let's actually go to Etherscan and check out wrapped ETH for a little bit. To get an idea we're connected here, right? So this is the wrapped Ether token. As you can see, it has a fully diluted market cap of $569 million, which is pretty crazy if you think about that, how much money that is. And there's over 2,396,000 Ether inside this contract. So what wrapped ETH is wrapped ETH is an ERC20 compatible smart contract. And the way it works is you deposit an ETH into the wrapped ETH contract, and it gives you back one WETH, it's called. And that stands for wrapped ETH. And now this wrapped ETH, this WETH, can be used by other smart contracts natively like an ERC20 token. The purpose of this was that Ether can be sent between users, like from me to you, or from me to a smart contract, or from a smart contract to another smart contract, or a smart contract back to me, but it can't be interacted with in the level of programmatic ability that ERC20 tokens support. So the wrapped ETH contract basically allows you to give this programmatic abilities to Ethereum. So we'll go in and check out this contract. This is a verified contract on Etherscan, and that means that the smart contract code has actually been verified online. So what we can do is we can actually go, let's go to the contract here. Contract, see that little green check? That means it's been verified. Contract source code verified. So that means that the contract that is on chain is actually the contract that was generated from this source code, if you can see here. And this source code describes the functionality of wrapped ETH, right? You have functions such as total supply, which return the balance of wrapped ETH. You have functions like the payable functions like deposit. Well, this is actually called a fallback function because it has no name. And that means that when you send ETH at this contract, it'll always go to this function, and in which case it calls this function deposit, which is right here, which basically increments your balance, right? So this is the wrapped ETH contract source code. And down here, this is the contract ABI. So normally when you are creating smart contracts, you're going to need this ABI because this ABI tells DappHero, but it also tells any software you're using to create smart contracts or interact with smart contracts, how to actually access this smart contract. So think of it like an API, but for blockchain, right? So this is, I think this stands for application binary interface. I'm going to call it application blockchain interface, but that's not what it really stands for. But so think of that like an API for this smart contract. So normally what you do here is you would actually copy API to clipboard, or if you're developing your own smart contract, when you compile and create your smart contract, you will have to copy this contract ABI yourself. And depending on what you're using to create your smart contract, this will be a little bit different. But I'll throw a note out here really quickly. This is not your contract artifact. Your contract ABI, if you're using something like Truffle, which gives you contract artifacts, your ABI is on your contract artifact. It is not the entire contract artifact. And that's very important. You'll see in the code, and let me just do a little example here. Oh, that's still loading. All right, so that one's a little bit slow. I'll just type it up here. Basically, you'll see in your contract artifacts, you'll see something that says like ABI, and then it'll start like this, and then it'll be like, you know, constant, blah, 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 blah. What you want, your ABI is going to be everything after that ABI, right? So that's just a little shout out to keep in mind. We may add some more documentation to our site for people. That's always confusing for people, how to get the ABI, because there are different formats of it. If your contract is an existing smart contract that has been verified, it has this green check mark in Etherscan, you can just copy the ABI from here and you're set. Now, let's go back to our DappHero. Let's create a new contract. Let's call this wrapped ETH. Description will be public mainnet wrapped ETH contract. Now we're going to choose our network, which would be mainnet. And here we would paste our ABI. We have a cool feature here because the other thing you need when you connect to a contract, smart contract, is you need the ABI and you need the address, right? So there's actually three things you need. You need to know the network that it's deployed on. You need to know the address where it's deployed, and then the contract ABI, how to interact with that. So in this case, let's first grab the address, copy address to clipboard of wrapped ETH. And DappHero has a convenience function here where if your contract is deployed on this network, again, doesn't work for XDAI, unfortunately. If you have a contract deployed on this network and it's verified on Etherscan, you can actually load that ABI directly from Etherscan. So that should make your, oh, well, it didn't this time. Hold on, let me just refresh. So that should make your life easier. So let me just go back to that contract. Oh, actually it did. Okay, so it did load it. Mainnet. Let's just click that once more. All right, yeah, all right. Don't know what that was, but it'll load your ABI if it is available on EtherScan. Sometimes EtherScan isn't working and then it may not load, but in that case, you would paste your ABI here. We've added this to make it a little bit easier to get up and running faster. So now that we have our ABI here, we can click save. But now we also can do something. We can inspect what would the HTML.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question. So the code just beside the mainnet thing, like before the load from EtherScan, from where you get that code, like OXCO2. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Yes. So this is the address of the smart contract, right? So as I mentioned, you need three things. You need the address of your smart contract, you need the contract ABI, and you need the network that it's deployed on. So in this case, because we're using a public contract that has the source code verified, which is the wrapped Ether contract, we have the address of it here. This is the contract address, which I click copy. And that is the address that I've put here, right? This is the address of our smart contract. Down here, this is the contract ABI, which you can get from here, copy ABI to clipboard. Or if you create the smart contract yourself, you will have to get your contract ABI yourself from your compilation once you've created it. And I can show later an example of how to do that using Remix. So we can go over that. Well, actually, you know what? Let me show that to you really. No, don't get distracted. We can go through Remix later if we have some time, where I can show you how you can deploy your smart contract there and get the ABI from Remix. Remix is a great tool, by the way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. So again, as I was mentioning, you can also click on this button, Methods. This will be useful for you later when you're doing development using DappHero. And that's because one of the #1, out of all the sort of like troubleshooting questions we have, it's normally around typos that are made in the HTML. So if you click on Methods, once you've added your smart contract and the ABI, if you click on Methods, you will see a list of the methods that are available on this contract. Name, approve, total supply, transfer from, etc. And what you can do is you can click View HTML to see a sample code snippet of how you would create the HTML necessary to access this, all right? And we'll go through the structure of this in a few minutes. So if you go back to projects now, ETHIndia wrapped ETH, now we can add this contract to our project. So the network is mainnet, and now that I've added mainnet, I'll be able to see my mainnet contracts, right? You'll only be able to see the contracts of the network that you've added. And you can currently, you can only have one network. So we add wrapped ETH, we click add, right? So now we have the basics of our project set. And from here, we can start to actually do our development. So as I mentioned, we've added a new feature, website generator, which will actually create a code sandbox with DappHero with your project that allows you to get started. So I've just clicked generate, it takes a moment to generate it. And if you change your project later, you'll need to regenerate, right? So if I click that, it'll now open up a code sandbox that will show my project here. Right? So this is all the HTML necessary to access all the methods that are available on the wrapped ETH contract, right? So let's actually break this down. Let me show you the end result here. This is ETHIndia wrapped ETH. And let me open the console really quickly. So we also have that. This button here, this is very important. It's called it's a network feature. which you will find under features. And this is the documentation. So if you go to network, when people connect, they need to enable their Web3 provider, MetaMask. That's because MetaMask does not natively give you access to it. You have to first ask permission, and the user has to grant permission for you to get the access to the user that's currently on your website. The code for doing that would be a standard button, and you add these things that we call a tag. So data DH feature, it would be network, because this is part of the network feature. And then you would say data DH property enable true. That's all you need. And if we go to the generated HTML page, you'll see at the very top, we have this button. Data DH featured network, property enabled true, enable Web3. And that generates this button here. So if we click on it, what'll happen is, and actually you're not going to be able to see this, I think, because let me see if I can show it to you. Well, MetaMask pops up in a different window. I'm actually logging into my MetaMask as I speak. Actually, you know what? Let me try and share my whole page, my whole screen, so that you can see the whole process.
So we don't have to write any Solidity code or use Truffle framework, actually.
So the short answer is no. The long answer is it depends. If you are building your own custom smart contract from scratch, you might want to use Truffle. You might want to use OpenZeppelin. I used to be the developer advocate at OpenZeppelin, so I'm a really big fan of OpenZeppelin. And I'm just going to throw out a link right there to check it out. They have a SDK, which allows you to compile, upgrade, and deploy smart contracts. And this is for creating smart contracts. It's a great tool. I highly recommend it. You know, Truffle is also a great tool, also highly recommended. But it just depends on what you want to do for your development of smart contracts. DappHero doesn't develop your smart contract. It allows you to connect to your smart contract. Whereas OpenZeppelin allows you to develop your smart contract, but it doesn't do anything for allowing you to connect to your smart contract. Hopefully that answers your question. So now we see this button has been enabled because we gave it these tags. It's been enabled as a DappHero element. And when you hover over, it says click connect to MetaMask. You click it, you'll see, oh, it's still not logged in. It'll say DappHero HTML generation would like to connect to your account. We click connect, and now it says connected. So now I've connected my MetaMask provider to our generated website, right? And what you can see here, you see all of the methods, and methods are each one of these functions in Solidity is considered a method, right? First of all, quick check. Everyone, is this large enough? Can people see my screen properly?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Okay. Maybe I'll zoom in just in case. So each one of these are methods, right? And they all each come up as an individual unit here. So the first set are public methods, and these are methods that you don't actually need a MetaMask provider to access. DappHero actually provides you a provider behind the scene, so you can read from the blockchain without needing the user to connect MetaMask. That's very useful if you're building, for example, a dashboard. You could build a dashboard for DeFi, a DeFi dashboard that would show you, for example, how much wrapped Ether there is, and you wouldn't need your user to actually have a Web3 provider for that. So here, this space here is the output for each one of these things. Now, these are buttons which go and fetch this data, but what's happening here is DappHero is auto-fetching this data. There's a feature called auto-invoke, which means that it automatically goes and fetches this data. And you see here, sometimes this number will change, and that's because the total supply has changed, right? So then you have public methods. Public methods are the ones that you can access without needing to do anything. So for public methods, you can put in an address, for example, this one, because it takes an input, and it'll give back your balance of wrapped ETH. And as a note, wrapped ETH does everything in units of way. So this looks like I'm really rich, but actually it's probably like 0.2, something like that, or 0.02. So everything is in units of way. So this allows you to like get a website really quickly to test your smart contract, for example, or to start building and developing from, because you can go back into your code sandbox. This is hosted on Code Sandbox for free, and you can edit your HTML here live, and then you have your site hosted here live. So that's a really great way to get started developing really quickly. So now what we're actually going to do is let's dig into the details a bit here, so we can talk about what connecting to smart contracts means, how you would do it from scratch, the different elements of it, right? So let's take, for an example, this first feature here, which is property method name. This div right here, I don't know if I can make that bold. Well, I highlighted it. This is called the method instance. And if you go to the DappHero documentation, the smart contracts, what we are doing is we have to create first a method instance, then we create the inputs, outputs, and the invoke on it. Maybe let's see if I have a slide on this. No, so let's just go through it. So let me delete all these other things down here for now, just so that we can focus.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
So this HTML has been created automatically with your smart contract?
Yeah, so this HTML is generated automatically from the smart contract that you added to your project, which in this case is wrapped ETH.
All right. Okay.
If you created your own smart contract and you added it to your project, it would also create the HTML for that smart contract. So this is a really great way to get started quickly, right? Using the auto generation. Now, the auto generation only makes a simple example. There are a lot of features that auto generation doesn't do for you. So that's where it's going to be really important to check out our documentation to understand all the different ways that you can actually create a smart contract instance, right? So let's go into this again. I've deleted out all my other methods. So I've just left one, which is name. And that is going to be connecting to, in the wrapped ETH contract, that actually connects to this line 23. And what that is all these things that are public here, like these variables, name, symbol, decimal, public, even these mappings, public balance of, public allowance, even though these are just variables, because they are public, the Solidity compiler will actually generate for you public getter methods. So the same way that this function deposit is public, and it will have a method that you can access, these arguments, or these variables, which are public on the smart contract, get auto-generated methods to access them. And that is what name is here, name, right? So smart contracts, when you're connecting to them using DappHero, they have a few different pieces, right? And let me explain a bit about how DappHero works. DappHero works using HTML because at the very bottom of your project, you will see this, your script tag, right? And this script tag comes from up here, right? And that is basically a script which is running the DappHero core with an ID, and it gives a data API. And this is essentially your API key. It's your project ID, your API key. And in your HTML, you have to have this script, right? And when your browser renders and gets to this, it downloads the DappHero into the DOM, runs it. What the DappHero core engine does is it scans your entire HTML of your page. Actually, let me go back to sharing just this window so it's a little bit bigger. So it scans the entire HTML of your page looking for these tags, right? And when it finds these tags, for example, in this case, data DH feature network, it knows, hey, you want this button to actually be connected to the feature network and allow users to connect their Web3 provider. Similarly, when it sees this data DH feature custom contract, it knows that, oh, this div is supposed to be connected to a smart contract. And then it'll connect that to your smart contract, right? So there are a few pieces for smart contracts. First, you create like in this case, it's attached to a div. It doesn't necessarily, these tags don't necessarily have to be attached to a div. They could be attached to other tags. Generally, I attach them to divs because it's just kind of easy in that regard. But you add these tags, which you can do manually. And the list of those tags is here. Because this is what's called a method instance. And this is probably a better place to show you a method instance. A method instance defines for DappHero what smart contract you're connecting to and what method you're connecting to, right? So you see the structure, you feature, custom contract, contract name, in this case is DappHero test, method name is hello, method ID is 0, and then we have another tag here, ETH value. So if we go back to our HTML, we have something similar. We have our feature is custom contract, our method ID. Method IDs are how you link together your contract instance, the method instance, this div here, with all the various features. So for example, the inputs, the outputs, any button that you would use for that method. And that's important because in this example, we've put the button here inside, the button and the output here inside this div, but actually it doesn't have to be inside this div. These other elements, such as this button, which makes this name button here, they could actually be anywhere on your site. Leave that. Sorry, that's remix. They could be anywhere on your site. So to link them, to tell the DappHero engine, hey, this button is connected to this smart contract feature, we have to link them with a method ID. So for each method that we are interacting with, we have to create a unique method ID, which we use to connect each of our features in that method to this method instance, right? In this case, we're adding a property called auto invoke. Auto invoke means that, and auto invoke works only for public methods. Public methods are, as I had said before, things like strings, public name, string, public symbol, any of these things that the Solidity compiler will auto-generate a public getter for, or public functions that don't change state, right? And what that means is you have two kind of calls to the Ethereum blockchain. One is called a call, and the other is a transaction. Calls do not change the state of the Ethereum blockchain, and for calls, those can just be done for free, right? So you can just query the blockchain and say, hey, what is, for example here, what is the name of this contract? You can do that for free. Other things such as transfer, those are actually, even though this is public, this is actually going to be a transaction method. So to call this, we're actually changing the state of the blockchain. So we actually have to send this smart contract a transaction, which is very different. You actually have to pay Ether for that as well, right? So for things that are calls, public information that doesn't change the state of the blockchain, we can use this property auto invoke. And that means when the website loads, first thing, it'll go out and fetch that data. If we were to get rid of this, we would have to use a button to invoke this action to get the data. Here we have the contract name, which is wrapped ETH. That is the name that we've given our contract inside. Oh, somebody's drawing on my screen. Oh, that's actually really useful. If you have any questions, you can use that drawing tool to like point out where. So that's the name of our contract. It's very important to always use the same name. But here's the name, wrapped ETH. And now we have the method name that we're connecting to, which in this case is name, right? That's this one up here, wrapped ether, right? So that sets up our method instance that describes for DappHero what your connection to this method looks like. Now inside, in this case, we have two things we want. We have an output and a button to invoke this output. In this case, we don't necessarily need the button because we're auto-invoking. And auto-invoked features are actually polled. So for example, if we saw over here, enabled Web3. Why is it locked? Refresh this. Right. So here it grabs that name. You can see wrapped ether. That's actually what's stored, hard coded inside the contract, wrapped ether. It actually polls this because we're auto invoking. So if you notice, if you sort of watch long enough on total supply, this number will change because yeah, so you saw it right now, it sort of changed a little bit. So we'll be polling the blockchain there. And for outputs, there's a number of different things you can do as well. If you check our documentation, where did I put that? Right. So we have outputs. Oops, sorry, I just yanked my earphones out. So outputs, again, you would connect via your method ID. And for outputs that are just general, you would just use the data DH property outputs equal true, and that'll just return the placeholder of data. Because now we have a number of different kind of outputs. We have outputs where you return just all the data. We have named outputs. So let's go through this. In this case, this is a named, is this a named output? No, this is not a named output, I think. So let me give you an example of what a named output looks like. So here, whenever we're doing return true or return this balance, these are unnamed outputs, right? This argument doesn't have a name. It has a type, but it doesn't have a name. But you might have a case where you would do something like you would return, so let's say if you were to return name and said return name, that output would actually be called name on the contract ABI. And if you dig into the contract ABI, you can actually always see what things are called. So outputs here are name. That's not name as in like the argument name. That's the name of the output. You'll see here is empty string. So that's actually what's called an anonymous output. And we have our documentation here about how to access anonymous outputs as well. Actually, where is it? Where is our anonymous outputs? We have it somewhere. If not, I will add it in the named outputs, regular outputs. Named outputs. Maybe I accidentally deleted that. All right, I'm gonna get on the documentation right after this call, just in case that's missing. But so you have named outputs and anonymous outputs, and basically that's when you're going to say whether or not you're calling the output directly by what its named is, or it doesn't have a name. So in this case, it doesn't have a name. We can inspect that a little bit again. Let's go back into contracts. Let's go to our wrapped ETH. Let's click on methods. We're already here. So balance of maybe has an output. No, that's unnamed output. Maybe let's get a different smart contract. Let me try and give you an example. So is there a smart contract that anyone would want to see in particular? Maybe compound. Compound die. All right, let's grab the compound die token. Let's look at what its smart contract looks like. We go to the contract. Let's see. Returns. See if they returns anything. There's a lot of functions on this. Interface. All right. Okay, this is a really complicated contract.
We can look into
That's
OpenZeppelin.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. So
Yeah.
then an Open Zeppelin contract that's deployed would be a good example of maybe block cities. Block cities for their. Okay, so Block Cities uses an Open Zeppelin contract for ERC 721. So you notice that their contract has been verified, which means that we can see the data of the source code here. So actually, let's just grab this one really quickly. Let's just pop it into DappHero and take a look at it. So let's go back to contracts. Let's create a new contract. Let's go to details. Let's call this Block Cities ERC 721 and ERC 71 contract. Is on mainnet. Let's add the address. Should be able to load that from Etherscan. We get the ABI. We click save. That's saved. Now we can take a look really quickly at the methods that they have on this one. So let's check out balance of. And this is also an anonymous output. Let's see. It's a lot of methods on this one. All right, well, you know what? We can actually just go and create a new project for this one really quickly. Oops, that's what I wanted. ERC 71 example. I'll leave that description there. I'm going to add mainnet. And I'm going to add block cities. Right? And so now I'm just going to generate the website for that. Loads up. It's always scary the first time you demo something. You're like, is it going to work? I don't know. Let's find out. So now it generates this for us. Let's just open up its own page. And let's do inspect. I always like to have my console open just in case. So inputting data from the same term does not exist in the contract ABI. All right, so we have a problem in our contract ABI there. Let me go in and check that in. Contracts, or oh, sorry, not wrapped. And which one was that for? Input name data for situation that does not exist. Let me go on safe transfer from. Safe transfer from. So I'm actually just going to comment this out right there because I'm going to look into that later. I'm not going to take our time up for that right now. For what exactly is happening there. But the input here is input 2. I don't see the data part. All right, let me just take that out. Let's try that again. Open that up. Transpilot modules. Inspect. Data. All right, well, I'll deal with that later. You can connect to MetaMask again. And automatically the functions that are predefined, the public methods, get populated here. And then you have the other ones where, for example, token ID, let's put in 3. Am I approved? No, that's the approved address. So I don't know if this one actually has any of the things that I wanted to show you on it. Let me scroll through it. All right. Well, suffice it to say, for outputs, we have 2 types. We have named outputs and anonymous outputs. That's a very important distinction because one of the tricky things is depending on the version of Solidity compiler that you use, and you can check this actually here where it says Pragma, the contract ABI is actually different. This should not be a problem for you as long as you're developing contracts using the latest Solidity compiler, which actually today is version, I think it's 0.6 today. But if, for example, I'll show you if we go back to wrapped ether, And we check out the contract as soon as it loads. This compiler has been made with 0.4. So just something to keep a note on. And if you do run into any bugs, sort of like the error message that popped up there, please let us know. Older versions of the Solidity compiler do generate different styles of ABIs. We've tried to be as supporting of all versions of Solidity compiler, but sometimes bugs do come up. One thing that I do want to show you now, because I don't want to take, we're at the hour mark, so I don't want to like take up too much of your time here, is another feature that exists. So if like one of the questions that we commonly get is how to get like a bit more power out of your project. So you can use HTML only so far on its own. But what we have here, and let me open this one in the window. One of the things that you can do, we actually expose, and I'm creating the documentation for this as we speak, but we actually can expose how the DappHero engine is running on the inside for you externally. So if you notice here, we have another script tag here, and there's a document add event listener, and then DappHero config loaded. So if you listen on the window or on the document for this event DappHero config loaded, you know that the DappHero engine is live, running, and has loaded all its information that it needs. And then something that you can do is you can actually listen to the events of your smart contract, or you can listen to a change in transaction status. Now, I'm going to uncomment this. I'm going to save it. Oops, not what I want. Save. And now let me open this, I think in a new window, maybe. Right. So what we're going to see now is we are actually going to see a lot of information happening on the console if everything happens as I expect. Yeah. So here we can actually listen to all the different transactions that are happening and the life cycle of them. So in this case, we are triggering a read transaction, and then that read transaction has been resolved. The reason why this keeps flying by is because we have a number of auto-invoked methods. Well, actually, in this case, we only have one auto-invoked method, but that method is actually polled every 500 milliseconds to keep the data fresh. So you have this transaction status change all the time. Now, you can, of course, filter that out. You can require the transaction to be only something specific. So you can listen to this data object, right? And you can decide what you want to filter on. All right, so that gives you the ability to know where in the transaction cycle something is happening in case you want to add some sort of additional feature using jQuery or plain JavaScript on the window. The other feature here that's really kind of cool is, and it's popularly requested, smart contracts emit events. And events aren't necessarily the most scalable thing in the world, but it's very useful to be able to access them because contracts such as wrapped ether, they will emit a transfer event when new wrapped ether is created or it's sent from one place to another. So if you use this inside a script tag down here, once DappHero config is loaded, you can actually now listen to smart contract blockchain event, right? And let's open that up again into a new console, into a new window, inspect. It'll probably take a moment for us to see something, but basically whenever someone out there in the blockchain, on the blockchain, Ethereum, interacts with wrapped ether, the contract, and it emits an event, that event will actually pop up in our console, right? And we kind of have to wait for somebody to do that. But wrapped ETH is very popular, so they probably will. Oh, there we go, right? So blockchain events. This is happening on the blockchain itself. We go into the value on the object. We'll see that the event was deposit. So somebody deposited money into wrapped ETH. And these are the actual arguments, which is the address that deposited and the amount that they deposited as a big number instance, right? So this is really useful if you want to add some sort of like dynamic information to your website, right? So you can use here inside this callback, you could add jQuery or vanilla JavaScript to, for example, you could have a table of transfers, and every time there's a transfer event, you can append a new element to the DOM with the information about that transfer event. or the same thing with a deposit event, right? Whatever your event happens to be on your smart contract, you can easily add it there. So that's a really powerful feature. Another feature that's really important and really useful here that I want to show you, I'm going to clear the console. Something that can be very tricky sometimes is troubleshooting. Oh, okay, we'll keep having our blockchain events fire off. So on the window, we actually, and this is kind of an advanced feature, and I'm writing the documentation about this now, but on the window, we put DappHero. We have a DappHero object on the window. So it would be window.DappHero specifically. And if you open this object up, we are exposing to you the full power of the DappHero engine, right? So you see here your configuration file, which is your smart contract wrapped ETH. You can actually see on it the ABI, the address, the network ID. You can actually look into the contract ABI to see all the different functions, all the methods, their inputs, their outputs. We also give you directly the function to listen to the change in different contract features, such as the auto invoke, the invoke trigger. That's when somebody would press a button. So these are functions that you can use to listen to specific actions that users are taking on the DOM. We give you also the provider. So you have the ability to directly access the MetaMask provider that the user is connected with. And that you can use to send transactions directly using vanilla JavaScript, or call any sort of other sort of functions that are available. We're using the Ethers.js library. So you have the full power of Ethers.js available to you right here. And then we also have a feature here called Toggle Highlight, which just allows you to see what your toggle highlight, what your DappHero functions are. So if you do that, it'll highlight on your page where your DappHero enabled features are. And that's very important, because if you're using a tool like Webflow or a third-party tool where you add your tags, it can be confusing sometimes to understand which elements are DappHero enabled. But if you type window.DappHero.toggle highlight, we will highlight the elements for you, so you can sort of like remember where your elements are. So we're about an hour and 10 minutes, or probably like 10 minutes over time. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
I know that was a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, and we're developing fast, so
Yes, sir. So actually my question is, how does a decentralized network work for an active network, like a text application or a video streaming application?
So I think in that case, it would depend on how you wanted to build that application, or how you wanted to connect that application. So a good example, there's a project called LivePeer, which does transcoding using the Ethereum blockchain, or at least it organizes transcoders using the Ethereum blockchain. And they use a smart contract, so you could connect to the LivePeer smart contract, for example, and build an application somehow connecting to that. If you had a text application, you might be able to do it directly on chain. Maybe by text application, you mean storing text on the blockchain, or you can also store hashes to data externally outside the blockchain. A feature that's coming this month, we'll probably have it enabled in the next week or so. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Whenever I say that, then it takes so much longer. But hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have a storage enabled. So on the DappHero window object, you'll be able to actually add data to IPFS directly on the window on the client side. So then you'll be able to store JSON data, metadata in the decentralized storage environment. And then you can access that in your front end. So the short answer to your question is, it's up to you. It depends on how you want to do it.
So I have a question too. So in this, like, we created a website here. So if we want to add more features to the site, so we have to make changes in that Solidity code as well, I guess. That's how
Well,
it will reflect.
Right. So it depends on what you want to change, right? So if you want to change the way your Solidity code works, you don't actually make a change to the code. what you do is you deploy a new version of code, right? Because the code that you've deployed on the blockchain, that's forever, that's permanent, right? And that's very important because in the features where we went to EtherScan to verify the contract, to see the verified contract, when you see that code, you can read, understand how that code works, and now you know that code will always work that way, right? And now, of course, you have to be really good at reading code because sometimes things can happen that you didn't expect, and it'll always be that way. So if you do want to make changes, actually what happens is you write a new version of your code, you deploy a new version of your code, and then in DappHero, you go and you create a new contract with a new address, and then delete the old. You actually probably just update the address of your contract in DappHero as long as the ABI was the same, as long as the way you interacted with it is the same, and then keep moving. If you wanted to update the front end of your application and you don't need to change the smart contract, then you can just use your HTML skills or your JavaScript skills to, you know, you can use jQuery or, you know, whatever you can change the look. Like, as a note, the site that we auto-generate, right? This is a convenience. You know, we're using something, the CSS styling comes from something called MVP CSS. So it's really simple style sheet that allows you to just get started really quickly. But this HTML is intended just to sort of get you going so that your first experience is success. But ideally, you'll probably want to design your own thing. You'll probably want to add it into your existing HTML, or you'll probably go into this HTML and totally change it. You know, you'll use your own style sheet because this style sheet is actually loaded in another script tag. You know, you'll design it yourself. So if you want to make changes on the front end, you'll just change it in the HTML.
Like
Excuse me.
Sorry. Well, did that answer your question?
Yeah, but, I just wanted to continue that. Like, if I like to go the easy way, like I mostly use the Bootstrap Studio. Most of other people won't be using that. Like, many people like to code from scratch. I use that studio. So using Bootstrap Studio, we can create the front end, and using DappHero, we can just connect the smart contract. So will it be a suitable, feasible way?
Yes, absolutely. So if I haven't seen Bootstrap Studio in a while, I'm going to look it up, but Bootstrap Studio generates HTML, correct?
Yeah.
So that HTML, you can now add these data tags and you're good, right? Because, well, also remember you have to add also the script tag.
Yeah.
Read through the documentation, right? Because the HTML generation is a lot easier, and it makes sure that you can generate something quickly, but you might forget the steps, all the individual steps that are necessary to make it work if you were to do it from scratch. But yeah, if you created something with Bootstrap Studio, and thank you for reminding me about Bootstrap Studio, I kind of forgot about that. You can just add your DappHero tags to Bootstrap Studio, and when it's live, you'll have the blockchain connected. But you know, feel free to reach out during the hackathon if you have questions about that. I haven't used that Bootstrap Studio, and I would love to see and understand the process of that because that's a tool I know that a lot of people use. So I want to be sure to support that too. But yeah, there's no reason why it shouldn't work. Anywhere you have HTML, because the magic of DappHero is that it runs in the client's browser. So it doesn't really matter. It's always running in the browser.
Excuse me.
Hi.
Hi. Now we are retrieving the latest transaction on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
How to retrieve the last 10 transactions or something like a mini statement from the blockchain?
Sure. So DappHero itself does not do conditional logic, right? So you wouldn't use DappHero directly for, say, getting the past 10 transfers. But what you would do is you would use JavaScript in this case to do that, right? And I'll just do some pseudo code for you really quickly because I would actually have to look this up how to do it specifically. But so in here, right? So once DappHero is loaded, what you would do is you would create something like, you would like connect to contract instance, which would be something like window.DappHero. Let me actually see where, let me see if I can remember where that is. So window.DappHero, provider, contract. Right, so we would have a read contract, and that's the instance of the contract. So let me just get property path. I'm just doing pseudocode because this is not how you would probably do it. But so where do I have it? Okay, well, anyway, you would do something like, you know, get the contract read instance, which would be something like, you know, window.DappHero.contracts.read contract, right? So that'd be like const my contract equals that. And then what you would do is you would go to the ethers.js documentation. That's what we're using. And then you'd probably go to events, contract events. Yeah, contract event filter. So then you'd say something like, let's just copy that. So then you would say, okay, const last 10 transfers equals contract. Remember, well, contract, right? It's a contract from up there. Contract.filters transfer from my address. I think Ethers does have a filter of from. I think they have some overrides for that, but I won't go into that. And then you would do something like const node equals document, you know, get element by ID. And then, you know, we would have something up here. We would say, okay, this header ID equals transfer list, right? And then down here we would say, okay, get element by ID, transfer list, and then you would say, you know, for each. Okay, it wouldn't be for each, but you know, it would be like, you know, some sort of loop, for loop. You know, so maybe it'd be like for, you know, transfers in last 10 transfer. And then you would do like document dot, I don't know what it is, append child, I think. Append child, maybe not document, but it would be the node dot append child, this transfer, right? And that, and what would happen then is once DappHero is loaded, once this event gets fired off that says DappHero config loaded, now we know that the DappHero engine is run. We would then connect to the contract instance, which is available on the window. We would do a filter for all the transfers that happen, and you would have to check the, you know, the ethers.js documentation to get the syntax correct. And then you would say, okay, we want to put this list of transfers on some node on the DOM here. And then you say for each transfer in the last 10 transfers, append this, you know, HTML object, like another div or a table or something like that. And then you would dynamically be listing all the transfers that had happened, the last 10 transfers, for example. Or, for example, you could listen to the contract events live. So while someone was on your website, whenever a transfer, some sort of contract event happened, you could, in real time, add a new DOM element to your DOM, like, you know, a new div or a new table element or something like that. So you could give that sort of like more advanced functionality right there, right? So it's a really, you know, you can also do this in React, and actually DappHero will work in React too, because the React has access to the DOM as well. So if you wanted to use DappHero like that, you could also reach out and say, hey, we'll wait until this listener for DappHero config is loaded, and then we can get the provider from there. We can get the data from there. So you could do it like that. You could use jQuery. You could use vanilla JavaScript. How you want to do it is up to you.
Thank you.
Hey there, sir.
Yep.
Already a fan of DappHero, by the way. I was waiting for some presentation like which would show our interaction with the user. Like I wanted to see how does a user manipulate the blockchain, or how does he send a transaction with some data.
Mm-hmm.
Does DappHero allow that?
Okay. Yes, it does. So it depends on the type of data that you want to send. But so let me share a screen and just do a quick example. Let me go back to regenerate my, not the ERC 721. Let's go to the wrapped ETH, right? Let's regenerate our website because I changed that code. Or actually, maybe I didn't need to regenerate the website, but I don't know. We're regenerating it anyway. Okay. So let's open this in a new window just so it's easy to see. Inspect. Console. Right. So these are those blockchain events that we just mentioned ago because of the script that I have there that just puts that in. So what we saw so far were public methods, right? And these are all being auto-invoked, so they're loading automatically. So if we go down to transaction methods, right? These are methods that actually you have to send a transaction to have them work, right? So let's do, for example, deposit, right? So deposit is just a function that allows me to deposit. So I'm going to deposit, I think I have like 3 ETH here. So I'm going to deposit. Remember, this is live on mainnet, so be very careful. I should have said this at the beginning. This is an alpha software. Be very careful when using real money. Don't lose your money. Don't lose other people's money. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So you go to deposit, right? Click deposit, and oh wait, I have to. Nothing happens because you need to first enable Web3. You have to give permission, right? So MetaMask pops up. I give permission. I go back down. I'm going to refresh just to be careful. Sometimes I have a problem when we don't force refresh your page. So click, I'm going to send in half an Ether. Click deposit. Now you see here, oh, actually, sorry, I'm not putting in half an Ether. That's too much money. So in this case, I canceled that. So you get a little notification here that says that your transaction failed. Check console for more details. In this case, it's just that I denied the signature. So let's put in 0.05, right? Click deposit. Now you see here, I'm putting in 0.05. The gas fee is, okay, the gas fee isn't so bad right now. Lately, Ethereum gas has been expensive. And then I click confirm, right? So when I click confirm, I have a little pop-up that does come up that says your transaction has started. So we wait a few seconds. This is the Ethereum blockchain, the mainnet. So this may take some time. So actually we won't, we'll just wait. But while we're waiting, we can check my balance really quickly so we can sort of, oh no, it already happened. So now you won't see it. You know what? That was really fast. That never happens that fast. Anyway, you can put your address in here and it gives the balance, right? And that's my balance. So let me put in, you see everyone that it's 3099. So let me put in another half an ETH. And I don't mind doing this because it's just wrapping the ETH so I'm not losing it. So let's go back up to balance. Wow, that's really fast. Maybe it's a Saturday and nobody's doing anything. So now if I click balance stuff again, we see it's gone up, right? So that is the act of sort of like doing a transaction. So to sort of like understand it a little bit more in the back end, right? Let me just find all the auto invokes and just turn them off because they are really noisy. You could make a filter, but I would probably mess up the filter. So, because what I want to do to answer your question is I want to actually show you the events that you can listen to. Oh, that's right. I could have just turned this to false. Sorry, I didn't need to delete that. If you put false there, it'll stop the auto invoking. Okay. So now let's go back to the bottom, and there's a little sample script here, which is listen to transaction status change. Let's uncomment that. Let's save this just to be sure that it like actually creates a new version of it. Let's open a new window, just because I like to see everything nice and big. Console. Okay. So we have to enable Web3 again, because for MetaMask, this looks like an entirely new site because there's a new address. And notice now that we connected, nothing's happening here. Well, that's because we turned off auto invoke. So now you have to actually click it to get it to happen, right? So if you want if you don't want to use auto invoke, you can just put buttons so people can actually click a button and get the data. So if you notice when I clicked, we had something happen here. It happens twice just because under the hood we are doing multiple things. So ignore the events. But basically what happens is we method name, the method name key, the value is name because that method is actually called name. Status pending step, getting and parsing parameters. There are no parameters there, so they didn't need to parse anything. And then you see that's a pending, and now the status resolved, right? So we know that basically what happened between these steps, the DappHero engine went out, queried the data of the blockchain, brought it back, right? So you can listen to that status change. It shouldn't be firing twice. We'll look into why it's firing twice, but that might just be the console displaying it twice. But now let's go down to the deposit again and watch what happens there. So put 0.5. You notice all these blockchain events are firing too. So also when I do this deposit, so now we have this deposit, we have a transaction sent to network, right? This is different. Transaction has been sent to the network. We did have the getting and parsing parameters. Then we had the triggering a right transaction, pending, value deposit. Our contract is admitted contract event. That might be us, that might not. Oops. So then we have transaction has been sent to the network, which status is pending. And then at some point, it'll confirm. Now it's going to take a long time. Watch. Now it's already been 30 seconds. More blockchain events are happening in the meantime because we didn't comment that out. So now we're just waiting for a transaction.
DappHero, do we need to write any Web3.js code? Like there is zero interaction with Web3.js, right? We don't need to write any Web3.js code.
Yeah, you don't have to. And actually, I just want to show you that one. It's been sent to the network. It's been resolved, right?
Okay.
Transaction has been sent to the network, resolved, confirmed, and you actually can get from that your block hash, the block number, transaction confirmed. Yeah. So to your point, to your question, no, you don't have to. You don't have to. We are like, there may be some things where currently you do. And if you do find yourself writing that Web3 code, and remember, we're using Ethers.js, we're not using Web3.js. If you do find yourself writing Web3 code, please reach out to me, and that might be something that we can add as a feature later. We are interested in removing that layer of complexity so that you can come in to blockchain just being an HTML developer who knows JavaScript or just knowing jQuery, right? And be able to build blockchain dApps really powerfully without needing to get into all those things. So yeah, that's certainly the goal of DappHero. In many ways, it's already a reality. So you can already do that. So yeah, the answer to your question is yes, with a little asterisk marks. You know, there may be some things like.
One more dilemma. Can I ask it?
Yeah,
so
sure.
Because I come from a Python and Django development background, so I mostly use Django as a framework to interact with my tabs. So I don't see much people do that. Like they would use React, right, Vue. But what I do is I read the data with Web3 and make transactions with Web3.js. So I use both of them. I want to know, is it a bad practice to do this because no one else is doing this? I can do everything effectively, but I'm not sure is it a good practice or not.
So let me ask you a question. When you're using the Python version of Web3, right?
Yeah.
Are you doing transactions on your user's behalf on the back end?
Yes. I just read the data with Web3, and when I make transactions, I almost use the MetaMask wallet only to get the user's private and public key. Sure. I'm not storing any of their keys on the server. I'm not sending them to the server.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say that your setup is non-traditional, but there's nothing wrong with it. right?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly DappHero can replace both of those components for you so that you don't have to use the back-end part or the front-end part. I could see where the Web3 Python could be very useful in generating the information on the back end, right? That could be very useful.
Yeah.
So there's nothing like, one of the reasons why I built DappHero in the first place is the standardization level of how we connect to the blockchain, especially for websites, is very low. And people are doing all sorts of things, which is fine. The larger question is, how scalable is that? How maintainable is that? How portable is that, right? If you're building for clients, are you building something that you know you'll be able to scale with? Are you building something that'll work in different frameworks, right? If someone comes along and says, no, we don't want Python, we want PHP. All right, nobody's gonna come and ask for PHP, I think. I mean, maybe WordPress, maybe, right? So we are trying to make this more standard, but if it works for you, that's fine. I would say probably still check out DappHero because it might help solve a number of like your problems in the front end.
Oh, definitely I will.
But yeah, you know, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Hi, sir. I'm actually fairly new to blockchain. Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you. You have a good
Yeah,
microphone.
Okay. So I just wanted to ask whether byte size matters in blockchain. Like, does it matter the amount of gas used or the ether used?
Yes, absolutely. So when you mean bite size matters, that could mean a number of different things, right? So if you are sending data to the blockchain, to smart contracts, your transaction may be more expensive the more bytes you send in. Every transaction does require that you pay gas. So the larger your transaction of the data that you, the greater the amount of state on the blockchain you are changing, and the greater the number of times in a transaction you change the state, the higher your cost. Yes.
So is it possible to convert any content into a Boolean value and send that Boolean value through a blockchain?
Sure. And people do, I mean, I don't know if you just want a Boolean value, because I think if you convert content to Boolean, it's always going to be true. If there's content, it's true, right? Like an empty string would be false. But something that people tend to do is they actually hash the data, right? So they create a hash of the data, or they send in, for example, a URL that points to where this data is stored elsewhere.
Oh, it's like a compression algorithm that they put through.
Yeah, but the hashes are one-way functions, so you can't actually recover the data that you hashed from a hash.
Okay.
But the hash can prove some other data is that data. And if you use storage such as IPFS, which we hope to have in DappHero in the next couple of weeks, you will be able to take that hash and put that into IPFS and get back the data. So yeah, what you would kind of use the blockchain for in this case is you use it for storing the file name or the file URL, but the actual file would be elsewhere.
Okay.
No? Any more questions? I can show you something cool that's not DeFi related with DappHero if people are interested. Anyone?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Sure, sir.
All right. I'll just do it really quick. I'm not going to explain the whole thing, just because it's already been a while. But people are still here, and it's Saturday for me, and I love talking about DappHero. But one of the things that we have in DappHero now, which is really cool, is we have support now for collectibles, which are ERC 721s. And you can read all about that in our documentation. But I'm going to show you a really quick example of how DappHero makes your development process so much faster. Which, let me just load up the NFT example. So let me show the project. Oh, edit project. So This is a DappHero powered site via HTML. Hopefully it's going to load in a reasonable amount of time. Okay. So what we're doing is we have our DappHero script tag here. You can see. And using just a couple tags, what we're going to do is we're going to access NFT and ERC 721 contract, an NFT that's been indexed by OpenSea. This is powered by an API. This doesn't directly connect to the blockchain, although you could add contracts in and then it could connect to the blockchain. But basically, we do the same thing as with contracts. We have this method instance where we have the feature is NFT. We give it a tag ID, which is like the method ID, and that links together features all over your DOM. We give it a contract address. I think this is like one of the NFT sites like Super Rare. And then we give it pagination, and we don't need to, but we give pagination limits. We're saying we want 30 tokens, and pagination offset is just like where in the list we're starting from. And then what we do is we create an asset container. And this container is a div where we just call it, we just say asset item equals true. The class is just for styling. That's not part of DappHero. And we give it a tag ID. And then inside we give it a link, which we have some special things in here like this token ID, which DappHero will replace with a token ID. And then we have an image, which has a tag of asset JSON path. So each token gets back an JSON object, a metadata object, which is the question before, is the address of that metadata object is stored on chain, but the actual metadata is not stored on chain, it's stored elsewhere. So that's the image URL. And then we have a H3 tag where we say the asset JSON path name, so we get the name. So here we have just this, and the code that's going to generate what I'm going to show you is only this, right? This is like 20 lines, and it's just tags. But if we go and see the output, the resulting output of it, what it generates is actually a full gallery for NFTs that are actually stored on the blockchain, right? So these are all tokens that are actually on the Ethereum blockchain, and these are decentralized artists who are creating different things, right? And then that link that you saw here, the anchor tag to this other page here, single NFT, that HTML, well, what it does is this also has a script tag down here. And then again, we have a container, we have a method instance, NFT, and we're getting our data from the URL bar, right? So we can pass query params. And what happens is now when we click on a single one of these images, right, single one of these tokens, takes us to the single NFT page, and then it loads up that particular token, right? So this is all done using DappHero, just a couple of tags. And that's sort of like a specific example of how the data is being like organized on chain, but the actual data is actually off chain. And in this case, it's NFT token. So that's just it's not DeFi related, but it's a cool other thing that you can do with DappHero. And that's also a new feature. So. All right, everyone, it's 12:10. I guess it's been like an hour and 40 minutes. If you have any other questions, now would be the time to ask. Otherwise, we'll probably wrap this up, but.
Hello. Yes, I had a
Okay, just a quick question, sir. Truffle or remix? What do you prefer?
Okay, so Truffle is useful. Truffle is really great when you're building a large project. If you're building a project that you want to probably, save in GitHub, maybe you're working with a team. Remix, however, is really easy to use. I actually have a Remix video on how to use it. Let me just get the link really quick and I'll post it in the chat so you can check it out. It's a really simple guide. Hold on, I have to switch my account. Social. I'm getting it so I can, it's a guide to it. Let me get it. Copy. I'm putting it in the chat. DappHero guide to Remix. Remix, I would suggest if you're new to blockchain development on Ethereum, use Remix. Watch the video to understand because it's not the most intuitive layout. And if you Google old tutorials, it's actually with an older layout. So it doesn't work exactly the same. So check out this video guide. If you're just developing yourself, if you're working on this hackathon and you're trying to move fast, I would say use Remix. You can do everything that you do in, well, not everything, but you can do a lot of what you do in Truffle and other things inside Remix. I personally am a big fan of OpenZeppelin. I used to work for them. I also find that the tools are very, very helpful. So for example, in Truffle, once you deploy a contract with Truffle, if you want to interact with that instance, you have to open up Truffle console. You have to write some JavaScript creating that method instance, and then you have to call it and you have to await it. With OpenZeppelin, you have a really convenient CLI, which allows you to like just deploy from the CLI. You don't have to write any like deployment scripts. You can just deploy from the CLI, and then you can interact with your contract also just from the command line. You just say send transaction, and they say, which method do you want to send a transaction to? You say this one. And they're like, well, what arguments do you want to send? The first one's a string, and then you type in your string. So I would say it's not just Truffle or Remix. I would personally say OpenZeppelin. You know, I'm a former Zeppeliner, so I'm always going to say OpenZeppelin. And then I also highly recommend Remix because it's a really easy way for you to like develop in your browser. So that's really convenient too. And Truffle, of course, people have been using since the beginning. They are great. So, you know, all of these are great options. It's personal preference.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Of course.
Hello.
Hi.
Am I audible? Hello. Am I audible?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. So I had a quick question. Like, if I want to host multiple sites, like multiple pages, so every time I have to create a different project and give them this same contract, then it will generate new URLs for each, right?
Well, no. You can always like, I generate new ones because maybe I'm a little bit lazy like that. You can always just edit the HTML in the whatchamacallit, inside the browser right there, and just click save and keep the same URL, right? So let me just show you again. Right, so you could just go ahead and, you know, you could edit this contract right here. So you'd be like, well, you know, let's say, welcome to my site, right? And then I keep the same URL and it's still the same site, right? So you don't have to. You can keep the same one. Actually, with Code Sandbox, you can actually host your whole, you know, you can use DappHero to generate, you know, add your contracts to your project, generate the website with DappHero. You get this generated website. Now you can go in and you can edit it, add new CSS, add different libraries. You can even add like dependencies, so you can add like other things to your project here. And then you can host the whole thing with Code Sandbox, right? Then you can just get like a URL and just forward it to your Code Sandbox. Then you have free hosting, right? You have your whole project live on the internet. You don't have to worry about you know, servers or hosting, any of that stuff. So that can be really convenient, especially for hackathon projects.
Yeah, right. Thanks.
No worries. Cool. So that's almost 2 hours. So I think I'm gonna sign off now. This is fun. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your questions. I hope that was really helpful for you. I hope you found it interesting. Please reach out to me. You can always find us on Telegram. Let me get our Telegram. I see somebody did join Telegram while we were talking, which is awesome. So you can always reach me at Telegram. I'm generally always around, or I will definitely find your message later. We are in alpha, so you probably will encounter bugs, but you know, that really helps me fix this and make it better. So please, you know, use it, let us know, join the forum, do all these cool things. I'll be around the whole month. So while you're working at the hackathon, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, even around not DappHero related questions. I was a developer advocate before, so I am more than happy to like explain other, you know, blockchain, Ethereum questions. So I am around and available. That's me. I guess I'm just going to sign off.
Hey, Denison. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for doing this, man. Really appreciate it. And I think the hackers had a great time, especially when they kept going on with their questions.
Cool.
I hope it was a great experience for you as well. Right?
Yeah, it was great. You know, almost everything worked. Live demos, you're always like, maybe you'll see. So great, everyone.
Great. Nice having you over, man. Yeah, appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a lovely evening. Here it's day, you know.
Yeah.
So that's it. Have a good night from our side.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Have a good hack.
Thank you.